Triumph of Surgery. So the title, A Triumph. Triumph means victory and surgery means a hospital. So here triumph means victory and surgery is a hospital. So let us see why the title, A Triumph of Surgery. So here we have a bit of introduction. Tricki, a small dog, is pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. He falls seriously ill and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. Does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? Now here in this lesson, it's a very nice lesson. Let's start reading and understanding the lesson. So let's look at the first paragraph. So when I am teaching, try to write in the meanings in your notebook or in your text. I was really worried about Tricki this time. I had pulled up my car when I saw him in the streets with his mistress, and I was shocked at his appearance. He had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. His eyes, bloodshot and rheumy, stared straight ahead and his tongue lolled from his jaws. Now in the first paragraph, we get to know that Tricki is a dog. And the doctor who is telling us about the story about one of his patients, that's a Tricki dog, he tells that when he saw Tricki on the street with his mistress, with his owner, the doctor was shocked looking at Tricki. Tricki had become hugely fat, like a bloated sausage with a leg at each corner. Right? Now, what do you mean by a sausage? A sausage looks like this, isn't it? A sausage looks like this, isn't it? It's a meat. But he's comparing it to the dog, where he calls Tricki a bloated sausage. See, look at the dog. A bloated means become extremely fat. He resembled a sausage. So look at the picture. He's comparing Tricki to a sausage. Now when you look at the picture and look at the sausage, Tricki, he somewhat looked like this, like a bloated, like a swollen, fat dog. So he is looking like a sausage but with legs. Alright? And he also had his tongue lolled from his jaw. Lolled means his tongue was out. The tongue was out, hanging out from his mouth. So this is the description that the doctor is giving us about Tricki. Okay? Clear? Now let's see further. Mrs. Pumphery hastened to explain. He was so listless, Mr. Harriet. He seemed to have no energy. I thought he must be suffering from malnutrition. So I have been giving him some little extras between meals to build him up, some malt and cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks at night to make him sleep, nothing much really. Now, Mrs. Pumphery, she usually brought Tricki to this doctor who is telling us the story, isn't it? Who is she brought Tricki always for treatment. The writer James Harriet, he was a vet. Mr. Harriet, he was a veterinary doctor, doctor of animals, and that is why she told him that he was so listless. He was so listless means Tricki was so lifeless, Mr. Harriet. He seemed to have no energy. He looked as if he had no energy. And Mrs. Pumphery, she tells, I thought that he must be malnourished. He must not be getting adequate nutrients, vitamins. So I have been giving him some little extra food. Besides his meals, I give him more and more food. I feel that he is malnourished. So I give him some malt and cod liver oil and a bowl of Horlicks. So you know what is a malt? Malt is a like a soup made out of grains. Yeah, it looks like this. Okay. So she gave him malt and cod liver oil capsules, or the cod liver oil that you get. Cod is a fish. So that fish oil also, so that he should become healthy, and a bowl of Horlicks. So what can you see here? She is in fact overfeeding Tricki, isn't it? Because in the beginning it is told he looked bloated, he looked very fat. It means she is overstuffing the dog, and that is why the dog has become sick. See here. And did you cut down on sweet things as I told you? Now, Dr. Harriet, he tells that did you cut down the sweets? I told you not to give him sweets. And I did for a bit. But then Mrs. Pumphery, she tells, I did for a bit. I stopped giving him sweet. But he looked so weak. But he seemed to be so weak, I had to relent. Relent means to give up. I could not stop myself from giving him sweet because he looked very weak. He does love cream cakes and chocolates, so I can't bear to refuse him. So I cannot stop myself from giving him because he likes it. And he looked so weak, he was not moving here and there. I looked down again at the little dog. So the doctor looks at the dog. That was the trouble. Tricky's only fault was greed. He had never been known to refuse food. He would tackle a meal at any hour of the day or night. And I wondered about all the things Mrs. Pumphery hadn't mentioned. So the doctor thought, I know this dog has become greedy, and he also has not learned to stop himself from eating because he is fed, overfed, hour after hour and day after day. Mrs. Pumphery is just feeding him, and this dog, he has never known to stop and when to say no and how much to eat. And he tells, I wonder, she has told that she has given these things, malt, this, that, cakes. Again, he says, I'm sure she must have given more things which she hasn't mentioned. Are you giving him plenty of exercise? Then the doctor asks, are you giving a Tricki exercise? Are you taking him out? Are you making him work, run around the garden, run around the field? Because that is necessary. Even for the dog, you have to take the dog for a walk. So Mrs. Pumphery, she tells, well, he has his little walks with me, as you can see, but Hawking, the gardener, has been down with lumbago, so there has been no ring throwing lately. So, what she tells, yes, he goes for little walks with me, but the gardener Hawking, who used to take him for a walk, that gardener now has some health issues. The gardener is having pain in the muscle, so he's not playing with Tricki with the ring that he used to generally play in the garden. So now Tricki is just eating and he is not getting any exercise also as well. Okay, let's see now further. So the doctor now further he tells, I tried to sound severe. So now the doctor he told in a stern tone to Mrs. Pumphery, now I really mean this. If you don't cut his food right down and give him more exercise, he is going to be really ill. You must harden your heart and keep him on a very strict diet. So the doctor, he tells that now Mrs. Pumphery, you should cut his food right now and give this dog a bit of exercise. Take him out for exercise. Otherwise, he's going to fall sick again and he'll be too sick. He'll be really ill, and you should harden your heart. You shouldn't really, out of your love, go overboard and feed him. You have to keep him on a strict diet and control your temptation to feed him. Mrs. Pumphery wrung her hands. Wrung means pressed her hands. She pressed out of fear. You can see this is what it means. Wrung her hands means nervously. She twisted her hands in this way. So the word Mrs. Pumphery wrung her hands. Oh, I will, Mr. Harriet. I am sure you are right, but it is so difficult. So very difficult. She set off, head down, along the road as if determined to put the new regime into practice immediately. Then she said, I will try, but it is really difficult for me. And she felt very sad because her dog was sick. And maybe the doctor thought she will think of starting the new routine, new rules for the dog. I watched their progress with growing concern. The doctor was also worried. He knew Mrs. Pumphery won't be able to stop her temptation. Tricki was tottering along in his little tweed coat. Tottering means moving. Along in his little tweed. Tweed means woolen coat. Woolen coat. See here in the picture it is given, no, the coat he is wearing, a woolen coat. And here also see how he is looking like a sausage, fat with his tongue outside. Tricki was tottering along in his little tweed coat. He had a whole wardrobe of these coats for the cold weather and a raincoat for the wet days. He struggled on drooping in his harness. Drooping means to getting attached in his harness, falling in his harness. Harness means the strap. I thought it wouldn't be long before I heard from Mrs. Pumphery. Look, this is the strap. So what he says, the doctor, that the dog was struggling and drooping in his harness. He was like as if he was falling and hanging onto the string of the belt that is attached to his neck, and body. I thought, now the doctor thought, I think the dog is going to face some more health issues and Mrs. Pumphery is going to again call me. The expected call came within a few days. Expected call, why it is called an expected call here? Because before, when the doctor saw the dog, he knew that this dog again is going to fall sick and Mrs. Pumphery is going to call the doctor. Mrs. Pumphery was distraught. Distraught means she sounded worried. Tricki would eat nothing, refused even his favorite dishes, and besides, he had bouts of vomiting. Bouts means cycles of vomiting. Lot of times he was vomiting. He spent all his time lying on a rug, panting. Panting means trying to breathe, finding it difficult to breathe. He didn't want to go for walks, didn't want to do anything. So after a few days, Mrs. Pumphery called and she said that she was really worried, and she said that Tricki is not eating anything, not even his favorite dishes. He's vomiting continuously, he's lying on the rug and he's panting. Yeah, he's finding difficult to breathe. Let's see now. I had made my plans in advance. The only way was to get Tricki out of the house for a period. I suggested that he be hospitalized for about a fortnight to be kept under observation. So the doctor told that now he decided, he made his plans, the doctor, that he is going to remove Tricki from Mrs. Pumphery's house for a while so that he treats Tricki properly. So he suggested Mrs. Pumphery that I'm going to hospitalize Tricki fortnight. Fortnight means for 14 days I'm going to keep the dog with me and treat him. The poor lady almost swooned. Swooned means fainted. She almost fainted. She was sure he would pine and die if he did not see her every day. So your pine means he would desire, he would wish and want to be with her, and die if he had not seen her every day. So your pine means to desire, to wish. But I took a firm line. I took a firm line means the Dr. James, he took the firm decision, and Tricki was very ill, and this was the only way to save him, by keeping him hospitalized. In fact, I thought it best to take him without delay, and look here, and followed by Mrs. Pumphery's wailings. Wailings means crying. So why Mrs. Pumphery was crying? He said then and there only he decided to take the dog to the hospital. I marched out to the car carrying the little dog wrapped in a blanket. So the doctor, he took Mrs. Pumphery's dog Tricki, and he decided to hospitalize him. So Mrs. Pumphery, she got quite emotional and she started crying. The entire staff was roused and maids rushed in and out, bringing his day bed, his night bed, favorite cushions, toys and rubber rings, breakfast bowls, lunch bowl, supper bowl. Realizing that my car would never hold all the stuff, I started to drive away. See here now. So Mrs. Pumphery, she was a rich lady. She had a lot of people. She had a staff. She had helpers at home, and the entire staff was roused, means was made to work, because Tricki was going to the hospital. The maids, the staff, they rushed bringing Tricki's things, and keeping in the doctor's car so that Tricki would be comfortable there in the hospital. So they brought his bed, his night's bed, his favorite cushions, pillows, toys, and rubber rings, breakfast bowl, lunch bowl, supper bowl, all the things. So we get to know that he was pampered a lot, isn't it? He was pampered by Mrs. Pumphery unnecessarily. He had so many things. See a lunch bowl, a separate breakfast bowl, supper bowl to eat his food at night, isn't it? So the doctor realized now if they go on putting things in my car, there won't be place for us to sit. So immediately the doctor took the dog and he went away. As I moved off, Mrs. Pumphery, with a despairing cry, threw an armful of little coats through the window. Okay, despairing means like she had lost all her hope. She was so sad and she was departing from her favorite pet, and because she saw the doctor was hurrying, immediately through the window she threw in the coats that he used to wear for Tricki. I looked in the mirror before I turned the corner of the drive. Everybody was in tears. So he was too pampered. The dog was too pampered. Everyone loved him. Nobody wanted to depart him. But in fact, out of their love, they were doing things that were harmful for the health of the dog. Out on the road, I glanced down at the pathetic little animal. Pathetic means poor, gasping on the seat by my side. Gasping means unable to breathe, trying to breathe. I patted the head and Tricki made a brave effort to wag his tail. So doctor patted the animal's head. So little bit Tricki, he reacted by wagging his tail, by moving his tail. Poor old lad. The doctor said. I said, you haven't a kick in you. But I think I know a cure for you. You haven't a kick in you. You have no energy left in you. Poor dog. They don't know, these people, to take care of a dog. So I'm going to do that, says Mr. Harry.